How is everyone doing? Strength Chat episode 116, and today I have got 3 special guests for you. I'm going to dub this one the Powerlifting Roundtable Part 2. Today I am joined by Chris Kershaw, Dan Bedford, and Tim Garrett. How are you all doing?
Really good, thanks.
Good. Yeah, good. Thanks for having us, mate.
No worries at all. So, from obviously the last time that we spoke, we were all in person. For any people that haven't seen that episode or know much about your backgrounds, just want to give a little bit of an introduction to yourselves?
Yeah,
who wants to go
first?
My name's Dan Bedford. I'm a powerlifting and strength coach. I'm based at MP Fit in Brighouse. I coach a number of lifters online, international level all the way through to regional, and I work as a PT as well, one-to-one with all my clients there.
Nice. Spot on. Who's up next?
You on, Chris? I'll let you go. All right. So my name's Chris Kershaw. I made a terrible business decision and decided to become known as the heavy metal strength coach, which absolutely zero people give a fuck about. I'm a powerlifting coach and I've been a PT for around 10 years. Apparently I get paid to write things as well, which is pretty cool. I mostly specialise in training beginners and help them get comfortable on the gym floor. I've been a competitive powerlifter and thoroughly average at that for a few years as well. And hopefully I'll be able to contribute something today. So, yeah.
Nice, spot on. Tim?
Yep, so I'm Tim Garrett of Graph Training Principles. I am an online powerlifting coach and I work with powerlifters as well, different levels. Essentially just getting them stronger on the platform, improving their performance, getting them moving better, and just turning them into better powerlifters, essentially.
Nice. So with everything happening at the minute, I know from a powerlifting point of view, obviously there was a couple of competitions coming up, but now either they've been cancelled or pushed back. And just in terms of, obviously all involved in strength, how have you found everything at the minute? How have you found working with your clients and, your own training? How's all that been at the minute?
Who wants to go?
I'll go.
Go, Chris.
I'm lucky enough to have a gym that I can train in at home. So in terms of my training, it will be fine. What I'm trying not to do is post any training videos in there, just because I know a lot of people are trying to navigate this stuff in the back garden using wheelie bins and squat racks and things like that. And me just showing off with my fully equipped gym isn't going to be the nicest thing in the world. I think a lot of clients...
You might get robbed. Someone might come and steal it if you start putting that on.
Well, it's to be fair, with where it is with where it is in Wakefield, that's highly likely on a daily basis anyway. So. A lot of clients, they've had like a dip in motivation, specifically if a competition was coming up soon. But this is bigger than those people. I mean, people are going through some awful stuff. So it just gives us a nice long off season to focus on an even better performance when we do eventually get back to the platform.
Is that the same for Dan and Tim as well? Sort of a lot of people struggling with motivation. How have you been managing that?
Pretty much.
Pretty similar, really. I have quite a large online base, and I have guys who are gearing up for books, and then you've got worlds coming up as well. And it's been like quite testing for them, especially the guys who do take it like really seriously. It's like they've lost a little bit of their identity in a way, and I think they're struggling with that a little bit, some of them. But it's just about keeping training as interesting as possible. I mean, as Chris says, not all of us are fortunate to have kit in his back garden, so you've got really high level lifters who are now having to do bodyweight stuff and go for a run, and some of them just don't know how to deal with that. At the end of the day, the aim of the game for them is strength, and to do that without kit is a tall order. So yeah, I've seen a dip in motivation. Obviously, the guys that are competitive, it's a bit of a kick in the dick, if you like, because they've been gearing up for it, putting loads of effort in, especially the guys who were doing books as well, because it was only literally going to be a few weeks after this was all announced. But they're bouncing back well. Attitudes are actually coming back and people are finding ways around it. But in the sport like powerlifting, it's tough because we need kit to actually do the main lifts. And if you don't have that kit, we are limited on what we can do training wise. So I've seen that as a bit of a stumbling block. But most people now are coming around to the idea that this is an important thing. It needs to happen. and powerlifting's always going to be there. You know, training's always going to be there, so you got to come back to it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, there's always going to be more competitions. I think this, you know, will sort of blow over. This isn't going to be like forever. But you know, there'll always be competitions there, and you can always build back up. Tim, obviously, we chatted a little bit before the podcast started. How, what were your thoughts? How have you sort of dealt with this?
I think it's important to kind of realise that as a powerlifter, you never really get an opportunity to have an off season. Mm-hmm. You know, competitions a year round, always prepping for something. And this is probably, for the majority of lifters, is going to be the only chance they get to have an actual off season where they've not got access to equipment. They can't do the competition lifts. So you can either mope about, you know, being sad that you've not got access to stuff, or make the most out of this, you know, this situation now and get yourself to a point where you're moving better, you're feeling better, you know, you're dropping body fat, you're building a bigger engine with your cardio. You know, actually working on your mental health as well. For a lot of people, this has come as like a massive change. Like Dan said, you know, for a lot of people, it's part of their identity, and maybe kind of being a bit self-aware about that, being a bit reflective about that, and kind of thinking, well, why is this such a big part of my identity? Why has it left such a big hole in my life? You know, what am I using powerlifting to fill that I could be filling a bit more mentally, healthily, and kind of look at it that way. And kind of, I suppose, just looking at the silver lining of, you know, what does this opportunity present?
Yeah.
Rather than thinking, you know, what have I lost about this? Because you can spend, you know, we're going to be in this for a long run, maybe 3 months, maybe, you know, 18 months. We don't know, do we? And so, you know, there's going to be two types of people. There's going to be people that come out the other side of this having pretty much lost everything. And there's going to be people that come out of it having put in a lot of work. And yeah, they're going to have lost just as much strength as the other people, but they're going to get back into training, feeling better, moving better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm being pretty active about it.
Yeah,
I think with a lot of clients, it's about reframing the situation. So if they are all doom and gloom about it, just telling them they have the health and that we have a long time to work on things, and we'll use this time to work on your mental health, just like Tim was saying. So we just have to be leaders. We have to set a great example to those guys. I mean, yes, we can have our own struggles, but that'll be private. So I think it's really important for coaches right now just to try and lead the clients and help them reframe it, and just set some goals and do that normal stuff to keep things as normal as possible. And I hate this phrase now, but to create that new normal. And once everyone has finished wanking and crying and drinking this week, I think everyone will start.
Wait, we have to stop doing that?
Maybe
you're on your own
at that high frequency that is going on now. I think it's been maxed out. And then after this week, people will start to get into a routine again, and it's just going to be incumbent on the coach to start to promote a healthy one.
Yeah, it's like what you said there. One of the key things that sort of a theme through what you both mentioned is think of it as an opportunity. I know for me, with the online classes that I've been doing and the training that I've been doing, I've been looking to increase my my cardio a little bit to help with my recovery. And actually, you know, my shoulders were feeling a little bit achy, my back was feeling a little bit stiff. I've started doing things and working on my movement a little bit more, which I've then, because I'm in the same boat as a lot of people that I'm training with, because I don't have a home garage or anything like that. And something as easy as we try and mention it, and I think we actually chatted about this on the, I think it was Dan, you actually mentioned it actually on the last time we had the powerlifting roundtable, just going for walks. And, you know, just getting in that step count. And I added that in, put my headphones in, listened to some podcasts. And do you know what? Actually, my back was feeling a little bit better. I felt a little bit fresher. Little things like this, you know, when we go back into our, whatever, you know, your normal routine is, still keep that in there. So there's a lot of things you can work on.
Yeah, you'll develop a lot of new or better habits in a way through this situation. And obviously, as Tim and Chris just touched on, like the mental health side of it as well. You know, everybody's left with this big hole, and I know there's a lot of jokes flying around, you know, about now powerlifting's gone, like, where's your personality kind of thing. And but, you know, jokes aside, like, it does make you reflect on yourself as a person. You know, you can't just be defined by that one thing. And I think a lot of people will probably come out of this as like better people, if you like, in a lot of ways, because it's going to make you focus on the actual important stuff, not just the lifting. But yeah, as you say, like a lot of people will come through this a lot healthier, and it'll put them in a really good position. It'll set them up to actually kind of trampoline off that when it comes to actually going back into strength-based training. And you'll thank yourself for it. Yeah, there's going to be that drop-off in strength. It's going to be a bit crap to start with. But as you see your body respond to that, you go into this a lot fitter, a little bit more robust and all the rest of it. You'll reap the benefits like 4 or 5 months down the line when you come round to do some real strength work again. And I think we'll see a lot of that. A lot of PBs will fall off the back of this, like more so than normal. That'll definitely be the thing.
Yeah. Everyone will want to, there'll be, it's like when anything's taken away from you, I know, for myself, and I'm sure you'll be the same as well, and the clients, they'll want to get after it a little bit. They'll want to, the motivation will be there to kick on. So just touching on that, obviously, with backgrounds in strength training and powerlifting, when it comes to actually strength training, do you think everyone has to gravitate towards powerlifting, or do you just think it's a natural progression? Because obviously we've mentioned there that for a lot of people, powerlifting is their identity, and that's the whole thing that they want to do. But when people first start training, when I first started training, I wanted to get a little bit bigger and I wanted to get a little bit better at rugby. Whereas obviously now, I don't play as much rugby anymore. It's more about, the focus is on powerlifting. But for other people, it's just about generally, getting stronger and feeling a little bit better. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, go on, Tim.
Right. I think the really nice thing about powerlifting is that its progress is so easily measurable on all 3 lifts. If you put 2.5 kilos on a PB, that's it. You're definitely better because it's so objective. Whereas getting a bit better at rugby or getting a bit bigger, maybe you can measure your biceps and see them increasing. But that's such a slow process. For beginner powerlifters, you can put weight on the bar every single week, and that process is really easily measurable. So I think people fall into that just because it works so well.
Yeah.
But I think also the lesson to be learnt there in this situation is finding something that you can progress on.
Yeah.
As your replacement, as you dig into something else, maybe, it can be something that's not quite as objective. Maybe it might be feeling better. Maybe it's actually reps on something or time it takes to do something or whatever. There's loads of different ways of doing it, but just bearing in mind that's a lesson to take, find that progress, measure it, and hopefully that'll keep you sane.
Chris and Dan, your thoughts?
I think if powerlifting is your everything, and that's all you've got, this is a time to research other things, maybe mindset, maybe working on some technical stuff if you have access to a barbell or whatever. So it's just about being resourceful and just changing your focus slightly. So just because that training isn't there doesn't mean that you can't focus on every single other aspect of powerlifting at this time.
Yeah. I think powerlifting is what people go towards because it's like a cultural strength coaching thing. Barbell movements are like the one. They're like the holy grail. You get a better squat, you get a better deadlift. They're seen as like the ultimate. I think if we're just talking about strength in general, unless you're actually going to compete in powerlifting, I wouldn't say the most necessary things you need to do. There's plenty of other stuff you can do to just get stronger. But as Tim says, I think you just need to go about it the right way. There needs to be an element of progression. If that's not there, then it doesn't really matter what you're doing because you're just kind of going in blind. But 100% you can get a lot stronger without having to do squats and deadlifts and bench press. There's plenty of other options that you could go down. And to be honest, it's always nice to have that novelty there as well. I think, as you're all aware, I've probably coached powerlifters quite a while now. You end up going down a road where you end up so hyper specific with your training over a long period with barbell movements. You just start to see people either burn out or injuries creep in, or they become so one dimensional that they can't hack anything else.
Yeah.
So I think in strength in general, as like a topic and just getting stronger, there's a lot more to it than just barbell movements. And I think there's a lot to be said for being that little bit more well-rounded and being able to do different things. But I think, as Tim said, the beauty of barbell stuff is it's weight on the bar, you can measure it, and there's clear progression there. So it's a good place to start. And I think mastering those movements will carry over well to a host of other things, to be honest. I mean, if you get good at squatting and deadlifting, your athletic ability in general will probably improve. So I think it's probably worthwhile learning it. That being said, a lot of the best athletes in the world don't bother too much with squatting or deadlifting. They do a lot of other stuff because the injury risk is too high, especially when you're loading up heavy and all the rest of it. So time's better spent elsewhere. So for me, it's more just what's best for you. What are your goals? Obviously, as you mentioned with rugby, you might be better off, actually getting out and doing sprint work and doing plyo work and all the rest of it. Your time spent in the squat rack, it'd be useful, but it doesn't need to be as much as what a strength athlete would be, because it's not specific to what you're doing. So yeah, I think, powerlifting is a pure strength sport, so you're going to need to spend the time doing that. But there's definitely a lot of other avenues that I've noticed, especially over the last year or so. My approach to coaching has changed quite a bit with that. Having committed time to doing other things. I literally committed an 8-week block to doing an incline chest press variation instead of bench. And my bench press went up, my shoulders felt better, and I actually felt bigger and more jacked in myself as well. I was getting a pump from it, and I was like, do you know what? I'm enjoying this, and I'm actually still getting stronger. It is actually translating into something that's important. Yeah. So for me, there's always other avenues, and barbells are great, and we'll always love barbell sport and all the rest of it. But there's other options that are probably a little bit less risky that you can get a similar reward from, is what I'd say.
I think that's a really good explanation there. Just sort of building on that. So powerlifting has grown, and with social media, probably everyone's got a powerlifting handle on Instagram or something like that, and there's loads of content out there. As coaches yourselves, obviously, Chris and Dan maybe training a broader variety of clients, and Tim just focusing on the powerlifting side of things. Do you find that people are coming to you saying, right, I want to do powerlifting with not much experience, just because it's a little bit more seen within social media and that sort of stuff? Or do you still find people are just coming in and saying, right, well, I just want to get strong? Sort of, what are your thoughts on that, and what are your experiences with that?
Bit of both. I'll just touch on it quickly, and I'll let Chris crack on with this as well, because I think he'll have seen a lot of it in the gym. I do, because obviously I market myself as a strength/powerlifting coach. People generally come to me for that. Yeah. But I do have a lot of general clients who they're interested in powerlifting, and they want to learn the compound movements. But I very quickly try to find out the why, because it's one of those sports like any other that if you're actually going to be any good at it, it requires a serious amount of commitment, and it requires you to shift your focus of training quite specifically towards that. And that's something that I get in there early on, because if you don't want to get really bored really quick of getting under a bar, unless you absolutely love doing that 4 or 5 days a week, you're going to not enjoy this after a few months. You're going to get really bored really quick, and your interest will fizzle out, and you'll probably get sick of lifting as well, which is, ultimately what we don't want. So a lot of the time, unless I see some serious potential in somebody, or I know they're really keen, I know they've got it, if you know what I mean, yeah. I'll probably talk them out of it. I will always encourage them to learn, barbell movements, squatting, deadlift, if they want to. I don't always think they're necessary, and I don't always bring them up to start with clients. But if they want to, cool, it's a good thing to learn. But you have to obviously understand at that point it's going to take a few months for most people to actually get to a good standard of lifting and be able to do it well. So it's one of them. I generally talk people out of it unless I know that they're really keen, because it's one of those sports that if you don't have the right mindset for it, it becomes monotonous really quickly. And as much as we try and spice up training, you can't get away from the fact it has to be specific. Yeah. So if you're not into that and you can't commit to that, I would just not bother.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I know for me, it was just something competitive. I knew I'd always compete in something, and with work, can't play as much rugby. So all right, I'm not competing every weekend, if you like. But there is that competitive edge there, which, to be honest, sort of, and your background as well, Dan, sort of looking at what people have done before, it's sort of powerlifting has filled a hole from something else the more you chat with people. Yeah. Chris and Tim, what have you found?
Well, I think that the prevalence of people coming to me for specifically powerlifting to compete for the first time is definitely increasing. I'm not sure whether that's because I market myself as a powerlifting coach and a strength coach, but there's also there's quite a number of people that just on the gym floor they just want to get stronger, and then when I see them, let's say they've got levers that are designed perfectly for squatting, for example, I said like I'll just drop it into conversation like you're really good at squatting, like we could try a powerlifting competition and whatever, and we'll see how you find that. And then if they can handle the monotony of training and that ultra specificity, then we'll probably go from there. I really like it when someone can say that they've competed that one time, and then they can see whether they love it from there, because I think that can provide a great deal of motivation for someone, and it can provide stories to tell later down the line. So I won't really try and steer them clear of it unless I can tell that they absolutely hate it, or that it's adding too much stress to their life. Let's say they go to pieces every time they come within 4 weeks of testing their maxes, for example. I know that a competition might be bad for their mental health, for example, and then I might put it on the back burner. But if it's the opposite of that and they can handle it, then we'll go for it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's what I was getting at with my point. Like, if the pressure of it in certain numbers every session, every week, and, you know, if the type of people put a ton of pressure on themselves, and like Chris says, if it starts affecting them in a negative way, and it creates like a stressful environment for them and training just becomes not enjoyable, again, powerlifting probably just isn't the one. But there's no reason why you wouldn't do strength training with them and get them stronger in general, but not put the pressure on of that. If you've got somebody who's competitive, and like you say yourself, Steve, like you come from a competitive background, it does fill a hole. It's 100% why I went into it. I wasn't obsessed with barbell sport or even strength training before I came into it. It was just something to fill a void. And, you know, I was one of the ones that was fortunate. I just picked it up quite quickly and did quite well, which I think if you do well at it and you have a good time doing that, you're probably going to stay in it because, you know, you're enjoying it and you're doing well. If you're good at something, you usually stick at it. Yeah. But yeah, for a lot of people, it fills that void from other sports. And if you've got a competitive nature and you want to do a sport that's not really that high demand physically other than, you know, the odd aches and pains and stuff, then it's probably the one to go down. You know, the risk of injury, I'd say, until you get near the top end, as long as you're moving well and all the rest of it, is pretty minimal. It's quite an enjoyable thing from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. From your point of view, Tim, obviously, a lot of you focus on just the powerlifting side of things. Have you found that you've maybe turned people away who maybe aren't a right fit for powerlifting? What's been your?
I think focusing certainly over the past few years, I've had more people coming to me who haven't done a competition yet, or haven't really thought about it properly, or don't know what they're going to be doing, but they've kind of already been through that self-selection process of, I like being in the gym, I like doing squat, bench and deadlift, and I want to get better at it. But certainly, as we've said about the pressures of competition preparation, falling apart and things like that, more so now, we'll have conversations at the beginning of stuff that if you're a beginner, we're going to build a really broad base. When we get to competition, we're not going balls to the wall. You know, so that last 4 weeks of competition prep, where putting myself through it, or when I was putting Dan through it, we were, you know, pretty much just towing the line of like complete ruin or amazing PBs. They're not going to be in that kind of position. We're not going to be redlining them. You know, we're going to be taking it nice and steady. We're going to be getting PBs, but, you know, we might put a third attempt on. It might be like an RPE 9.5. It's not going to be that absolute max effort. This is going to put you in a hole for 3 months after the competition kind of PB. And so, as I say, I do think when people get to me, they've already self-selected for powerlifting, right? Because that's what I'm advertising. That's, you know,
they've just not been through the actual process yet, so they need to learn that out.
Yeah, it's kind of figuring out like, how do I actually get into a competition? What are the rules? You know, am I competing to a competition standard? And I think there's kind of about powerlifting coaching as well, as that people approach it where there's still a bit of kind of mystique about the coach-client relationship and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's just giving themselves a bit more buy-in and a bit more accountability and that kind of stuff, rather than I like lifting up heavy barbells and I don't know what to do with it. And when they come to someone like Dan or Chris, you know, it might be edging them towards it or edging them away from it, depending on what. I think, you know, they've got through that kind of mindset, that selection process by the time they come to me anyway.
So building that.
I think if a client wants to do a powerlifting competition, and I don't think they're very good, or if they're necessarily suited towards it, I'm still not going to say that. Like, I'm still going to take them to the competition and give them hopefully the best experience they can possibly have. But I think another thing is, like, a powerlifting competition is an excellent way to work on mental health issues because of the issues that crop up coming towards a competition. I've got a phrase that I use to some of my lifters that is, every lifter is an idiot on competition day. And I've been thinking about this a lot more, and I think the less experience you have, the longer that process happens. So a beginner is an idiot 4 weeks before a competition until just after that competition. An intermediate lifter, there's probably going to be a couple of weeks where they're going absolutely crazy. And then as they get more and more experienced, then it might be just the competition day where they're completely irrational. So I think that's a progression in mental health. So that's another aspect where powerlifting can be so helpful, because they're working on those issues going forward. And I don't think that necessarily matters what level that powerlifter is. Those issues will still come up.
Yeah. So with that, because obviously quite a large base, and, you know, I've seen it in competitions that I've been to, there's quite a lot of, you know, beginner or intermediate lifters, and I'm sure you've all had experience of training them. And Chris, you mentioned there about the actual process, and Tim, you mentioned the training side of things, Chris on sort of the mental side of things. How do you actually, you know, when people are coming towards you and they have an idea of what powerlifting is, but they want to get stronger and build it up a little bit, how do you actually build that process and get them to a point? Because I know I've had it before where people are coming in and we've started adding some barbell lifts in, and then we sort of start talking about a competition and they're like, oh my God, like I'm not strong enough for a competition, or that seems absolutely leap years away. How do you go about sort of building that process from the training side of things and just from a coaching point of view of building their confidence up for that?
I think it's important to, from the get-go, regardless of, like Chris says, whatever level they're at, complete beginner, talented, not talented, whatever it is, as long as you create that foundation of it's just about you and your numbers and it's not about everyone else. I think if you get that in there early on, it makes it a lot easier for them to commit to it, because if they don't believe that they're strong enough because they're comparing themselves to everyone else, or they think that you label a powerlifter and you ultimately think, oh, fucking hell, everybody's going to be really, really strong, which, as we all know, when you go to a regional, there's a lot of guys there that, you know, your average gym goer could be stronger than them, but they're just not there at that day. So I think if you make it about them, at the end of the day, it's an individual sport. And as long as you put it across that you're not in control of what anybody else does, you're only in control of your own performance and what you do leading up to that performance and what you do on the day, it makes it a lot easier for them. So I just cut out that immediately. It's something I was really guilty of when I started. All I did was look at what everybody else was doing, and I just wanted to beat their numbers. And I saw some success with it, and I put a lot of pressure on myself, and it forced me to get stronger in a way, but maybe at a rate that I probably shouldn't have done it. Push myself too hard too quick, and then eventually, you know, thinking you're invincible when you come in, you know, suffered the injuries and all the rest of it. And then the mental side of it as well was terrible, dealing with that. So if you get on top of that early on, you know, talk to them about what the sport's about. It is an individual sport and it's just about self-progression. And if you get that in there early on, you're probably onto a winner, and it takes a lot of pressure off them, and they can just keep getting better and enjoying it. And then it gets to a point where if you are good enough, you will win. Like, it's just what it is. Like, if you're strong enough, you will win. You know, the coach has a part to play there as well, but, you know, you have to earn the right to be there. So, you know, focus on yourself, do what you can, control what you can control, and then you'll probably see some success. I think anybody that I brought into this sport, from being like non-athlete, average gym goer, up to being a pretty decent standard lifter, which I've brought a few through who are at that level now, who had done nothing before. So that's all I put onto them. You know, I knew they had potential, but I was never going to put that pressure on them and be like, I want you to achieve this. You're capable of achieving this, because that's not fair on them. Let them realise that themselves over time, and let them enjoy the process of just getting stronger. I think if you do that, like, everybody will enjoy it coming into it.
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as you it's like with anything, as soon as you get forced into doing anything, it's a little bit, a prime example is like the lockdown now, right? You can't go out. Everyone wants to go out for a walk now. Everyone wants to do that. And, that's why I think we touched on it a little bit at the start of this was the sort of the opening question, if you like. For some people, it can be a natural progression to be like, do you know what, actually, quite enjoying this lifting. Numbers are going up. Let's give competition a go. Chris and Tim, is that similar for you two, or anything different to your thoughts?
Pretty similar.
Yeah, go on, Tim, sorry.
I think it's always important, especially when someone's got the first competition coming up, and having a discussion about competition's such a strange environment, and it's so different to lifting in the gym, that kind of laying that foundation, planting that seed of that thought that this is just practice. This is your gym PBs don't matter. These are a completely new set of PBs, are in different circumstances. You're getting up on that platform, you've got 3 referees looking at you, everyone can see outline of your dick in your singlet. It doesn't happen at gym. And you've got to kind of like reframe all that progress. It's kind of like having that white belt mentality about it, that this is, you might have lifted really massive weights in the gym, but this is phase 1 and this is what we build off for now. And so you've got to go into the competition with that kind of mindset that, this is just a practice run. Once we get this down, we can start building on that. Just kind of see it that way, I suppose.
Chris?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just about showing someone that they can do this to the best of my ability, and then to kind of just build up the rules and the competency around those rules. So getting the commands to be subconscious, getting every single lift to be as subconscious as possible. And then I think it's really important not to put off that first competition as well. You can put it off for 2 years and be like, well, I'm not strong enough yet. And this competition becomes this huge thing in someone's mind, like this is absolutely everything. Whereas if you throw in a competition quite early when they've got just about enough competency, things might go a little bit wrong, but you're never going to know whether you can handle the pressure. You're not going to know if you enjoy that whole thing. So what I try and do is just show them that they can do it. I'll show them how to adhere to the rules to the best of their ability, and then we'll just see what happens. And I think you've got to downplay that first competition. Like, this isn't everything. This is just the first step, and you can do this. And it's the most supportive crowd. It's the most supportive field that I've ever seen. And as soon as someone feeds off that atmosphere, they tend to fall in love with it anyway. So I'll just encourage them to compete as fast as possible.
Nice. So sort of moving, maybe a sideways move from that, and it was something that you sort of touched on, Chris. And you've mentioned there that that's like what you said, Tim. It's phase 1, if you like. You go into that competition. But for a lot of people, if they just start falling in love with strength training, if you like I know, Chris, you've had a couple of people competing strongman. What if people want to go into other tangents? What's the other variations that you might measure for strength? Because like what we've touched on, not everyone has to squat, bench and deadlift for all those variations. If people do a powerlifting competition and then like say for example they do the November Yorkshire and North East competition, then they watch strongman over Christmas and think, I want to do strongman, I can squat, bench and deadlift, I want to do that. What are your thoughts on the other variations of strength if people are just looking to maybe put their foot in different camps?
Yeah, I think with the strongman stuff, well, essentially, clients can do what the fuck they want. So if they have a goal about a different strength sport, then we'll cover that. If it's something that I think is going to be dangerous for them, let's say they're hypermobile and they want to do a strongman competition that involves an overhead medley, I'm going to have to tell them. Sorry, the microphone started echoing. I'm going to have to tell them that that's contraindicated. But in terms of measurements around a strongman competition, it's all about the events in that specific competition. So let's say they have to do a 200 kilo yoke, for example. We'll get the distance and then we'll try and get as good as we can at that. So with that one, it largely depends on the event, and that can make it really interesting because you have a different set of goals depending on the competition. And I think that's one of the draws of strongman, because it is so variable.
Yeah, I agree there, and I think strongman is a lot more multidisciplinary than powerlifting. You see a lot of powerlifters who like to have a go at strongman. They do, and then they quickly find out that it's actually hard. And you've got to be quite fit. You've got to be quite fit. You've got to be a bit more well-rounded. And you tend to find it's the guys who've had some athletic background that come into strongman and do well, especially when it comes into the moving and carrying events and that kind of stuff. Because they actually know how to move the body and carry loads as well. Standing on a spot and getting strong, most people can do that and learn to get good at that. That's not overly complicated. But actually having the ability to do different things, I think that's the beauty of strongman, because everybody lends themselves to a different event a little bit differently. But in terms of training structure, yeah, you'd obviously be looking at an overhead element. Like bench pressing's great and it's a pressing movement, but again, you'll see a lot of powerlifters. You might see a powerlifter who can bench 180, but they can't put 100 over their head, and that's quite a common thing to see. Because they just don't practice the movement, and in general they're just weak in that range. So it's practicing that. I never see a massive carryover between the two movements in general, but if you don't practice it, you're not going to get better at it. And the same goes for carrying objects. The same goes for stone lifting. It's putting your body in a completely different position than you would be lifting a barbell. So, you're opening up training there a lot. Chris, if he's taking guys to strongman events, I think in the past I've done the same, and I've kind of only had them doing like one event day a week because it's quite testing. Like if you do 2 events in a session, you're absolutely battered at the end of it, like more so than pretty much any powerlifting session you'd ever do. Like it absolutely ruins you. It's hard work. So for the most part, you are focusing on the compound lifts and just generally getting fitter. But you will still need to do event-based practice. But again, the risk reward there is high because these events can be really dangerous. You drop a stone on your foot, it's game over. If it lands on your chest and you fall backwards, it's game over. You drop a big girder on your toe, all the rest of it. Like there's a lot more injury risk, I'd say, in strongman than in powerlifting. So you've got to be careful with how you program that. But at the end of the day, that specificity needs to be there. So you're going to have to do events training at some point. And if you get injured, it's just tough shit. It's one of them.
So from your side, maybe not the strongman side of things on that, but obviously we've spoken about the other side of, strength competition like strongman. From your point of view, Tim, with just the powerlifting side of things, is there any other variations that you use to keep training interesting or to build up those areas of strength? How do you keep that interesting for the clients that you're working with?
I think for the majority variations, you can kind of put them into quite like similar pools of what they're kind of going to do. So taking the squat, for example, you might have something like post squats or pin squats or tempo squats or whatever, chain squats, bands, whatever. They're all going to kind of work on the same qualities, but if you can just, once things start slowing down and the novelty of whatever variation you're doing starting to wane off, you can probably replace it with something similar but different enough to keep people engaged, just for the sake of bringing that novelty in without sacrificing strength development. And then you can kind of get more specific with that, with close to competition, and then we might actually have to target variations for the sake of building a specific portion of a range of motion or a specific, movement pattern deficiency, something like that. But overall, I think, just change things a little bit, keep people engaged. But the thing with powerlifting, I think the majority of people that come into it are kind of comfortable with routine and doing the same things, and it more comes into a matter of just changing joint angles just enough that we don't get repetitive strain injuries, rather than keeping people engaged. People that are in powerlifting for the long haul tend to be people that like a routine. They like doing the same things again and again. They don't get bored too easily, because by the time they get to this point, I think that self-selection process has already happened.
There's definitely comfort in that routine, and it almost gets to the point where people get resistant to change, and like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
To do a 3 count post squat? That's not low bar squat singles.
You do go that way though. I've been recently dipped my toes back into playing rugby again, and I've been absolutely loving it. But on the same side of it, when I'm in the gym, I'm a bit like, well, this isn't a squat. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing so much single leg work? Why am I jumping and moving? And you're almost fearful of moving away from it after a while. For fear of losing strength, or just not being on that same kind of training pattern and squatting and benching and deadlifting and benching and all the rest of it through the week. When you start straying away from that, you almost get detached from it, and you do miss it a little bit. And I think powerlifters are definitely creatures of habit in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for anything when it comes to strength training, it is a skill. And you need to practice it to get better at it, whether it be powerlifting, strongman. It's a little bit like, I don't know whether you follow Tom Stoltman. Obviously, I think he broke the world record for the Atlas Stone, lifting an Atlas Stone. He's really good at that because he really practices it. His technique is really dialed in, whereas you watch other people and they struggle a little bit. And if people are wanting to get stronger, instead of being, right, well, I want to do this, I'm going to do that. It might be a point that, right, they get strong for a powerlifting competition and they're dialing the technique on squat, bench and deadlift. Right, well, you've already got that base of strength. If you then want to go into strongman or weightlifting or whatever else it is, you're still strong, but you still need to learn that technique. It's still a skill.
It doesn't, like I was saying before with the overhead and the bench, it doesn't always translate. Like, you could be a really strong guy, but it's not uncommon to see somebody who can rinse a set of stones who's probably 20 kilos lighter than you because they practice the event. They might not necessarily be stronger than you, when it comes to static strength. It depends how you're going to define strength, I guess. But you get good at what you practice, and I think, as Tim was saying, there's always ways to bring novelty back into training. But at the same side of it, you don't want to try and reinvent the wheel. At the end of the day, you want to get better at bench press, do more bench press. It is a relatively simple thing. There's a little bit more to it than that. But if you're going to get better at something, you just need to do more of it. So adding in variations that just look ridiculous and adding multiple bands and offsetting weight and all the rest of it, it's novel. But in terms of carryover, the guy who's just doing more general work is probably going to get better than you are. Yeah, 100%.
One of my favourite sort of sayings at the minute, and I can't remember who said it. I think it might have been Mike Boyle, or it might be, I could be completely wrong on that. But you want to keep your plan B as close to plan A as you can. There's no point just sort of just doing it for the sake of it, because you're not going to get anything out of it. And a little bit like what you said there, Dan, in terms of how are you going to define strength? Strength is relative. So a powerlifter and a weight, no, they're probably too similar. A powerlifter, and let's stick with powerlifter and strongman, they're both strong. Then you would never say neither of them are weak, but one's a little bit better because they've dialed in the technique a little bit more on there, which I think sometimes when you see when people are first sort of getting involved in strength sports, I think they can look at people and be like, oh my God, how did they do that? I want to do this, I want to do that, and try and put a mishmash of programs together rather than thinking, right, keep the goal. Let's focus on this, and there's always time to move on to other things. Is that where you found other people have sort of gone wrong when it comes to strength training?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. You get people try and cover too many bases at the same time. Everybody's usually got a strength. Some people are better at squatting, deadlifting, benching, and you generally find the people who are good at a lift will do more of that lift because they enjoy that a little bit more and they're good at it. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for just keeping the main goal in mind, like I just said. What you tend to find is there's always a contrast, especially with strength sports. If you're going to get people who are going to do multiple, you're always 100% going to find weak links there because you've been specific in one area for quite a long time. So another area will have suffered, and that's just how it is. You tend to see the strongmen who've come from a powerlifting background, when it comes to the static events, the squatting, the deadlifting, the overhead events, they move really well. They're technically really, really good, and they're efficient as well. Whereas the guys who have mainly just done strongman are a bit more raw, and they'll move really well, like I say, at the carrying events and things like that. But then if you watch them squat or deadlift, you'll tend to find they're not as refined if they've not come from a powerlifting background. So they might not squat as deep. They might look a bit awkward moving and all the rest of it, but they're just strong.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you get from practicing the movement over time. You get to refine it, and you just get better at it, and you become more efficient at it.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good way of looking at it, because the more efficient you are, the less wasted energy you're going to have, and the more you can start putting those weights on the bar. And then a little bit like what you touched on there, Tim, as well, you can maybe change the variations to be like, right, where's your sticking point, or whatever it may be. So quite a good chat about people getting involved in strength training and how to go about it. Probably a topic that's more relevant for right now is that for people who were in the middle of their strength training, and if that, like what we said at the start, if that gets taken away, obviously with the lockdown and that sort of stuff, a big concern is, I'm going to lose all my strength, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to be nowhere near the weights that I should be lifting. What are your thoughts in terms of, are people actually going to end up losing strength, or what are your thoughts on that and experiences with that at the minute?
If I field that first, the short answer is yes, people will lose some strength if they're a high-end athlete. Like Dan was saying earlier about hyper-specificity, if you're not squatting maximally, deadlifting maximally, or benching maximally, you will lose a certain amount of competition performance. So how do we offset that strength loss? First of all, what I've been doing is giving my, and I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, is I've been giving my clients visualization homework. So having to think about like doing a bench press setup, like what they're doing with their feet, like something that I got from Tim, pushing into the end of my shoes, like I'm pushing into a wall or a curve, something like that. The way that the arch feels, the way that they psych themselves up before a lift, imagining the bar path and then pushing back up. And the science shows that, yes, it's obviously not as good as lifting the weights itself, but it will still promote maintenance of strength. And when people do get back underneath that barbell, it's going to not feel as alien. It's not going to feel like they're having to relearn that technique quite as much, because they've practiced it mentally so much. And then obviously we've got like lots of different variations of press ups, which directly correlates with bench press. Yes, it's not perfect, but we can get nice and creative, and we can still make progress there. It's when you're coming into lifts like the squat and deadlift where we're really going to struggle to make progress at this time, and you're probably going to see a little bit of regression. What I've got people doing is just starting to work on a little bit of power stuff, because after 3 to 5 days, that's going to be the stuff that's going to drop off the cliff the most. So doing like little hill sprint drills and little slams, if they've got like a medicine ball or something like that, is going to be something which we'll do just to work on slightly different areas, coupled with that visualization stuff. When we get back underneath a barbell, what we're hoping to see is that progress has gone down as little as possible.
Tim, Dan, is that something similar that you've been addressing? Yeah. You're working with?
I think, like as we discussed when we first opened this, unless you have got kit at home in a garage, you're going to get a drop off. Like, it's just one of them things you should probably accept early on. But I have seen a lot of posts flying around lately from people like Eric Helms and other guys who are quite renowned in this area, especially when it comes to like hypertrophy stuff. And it is quite common knowledge, really, that like maintaining an amount of muscle mass that you've got is a lot easier than gaining it. So I'm kind of shifting the emphasis from strength a little bit, because if you haven't got the kit, it's just not going to happen. So there's no point in putting that pressure on people to try and maintain strength, especially not develop it. It's just not going to happen. So you're better off just shifting the focus a little bit. And I touched on this on a post I put on last week, and basically it's a case of, one, you've got the option of thinking of other areas that you've neglected. So athleticism, fitness, dropping fat, all the rest of it, that kind of thing. But in terms of maintaining muscle mass, that can be done with pretty little load. Like, I dare say could probably be done if you're invented enough with body weight, depending on the level and size you're at. But, for you, even myself, 95 to 100 kilos, relatively decent standard power lifter, not overly fat, I can maintain the muscle mass I've got by just using the kit that I've got at home, a few kettlebells, body weight. You've just got to be inventive enough. In terms of the strength stuff, I think the best way to get around that is looking at probably speed development, so we're looking at power stuff, so plyo stuff, and then probably slowing tempo down as well. So we're looking at like time under tension with the limited load. I think if you can make the most of those two, you're going to maintain as much as you possibly can. So, you know, like plyo, press-ups, jump, squats, all the rest of it. That kind of stuff translates to force production. So that's what you'd be looking at in terms of like an option. But yeah, everybody's getting really creative. But I would just, from my own perspective, tell people, unless you've got the kit, don't put the pressure on yourself to try and maintain strength. Of course, stay as strong as you possibly can, but I would honestly shift the goal a little bit to something that you can actually get excited about, to something that you can enjoy, and something that you're going to actually commit to over this period. I think if you don't do that, you're going to get lost really quickly because you don't have a barbell. And that's where we're going to see the big drop off in people's mental state as well, because they can't lift. And it's like, right, that's okay, but I accept early on that we can't do that. Let's shift the goal. Let's work on other areas. Tim's mentioned loads in terms of, you know, movement quality, restoring some kind of mobility and all the rest of it. If you focus on that stuff and come back just more prepared to take that jump when you get back, I think we're going to be in a good position. Try and get excited about that as opposed to where your strength is now and what's going to drop off. I think that would be my main advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things that, you know, I'll try and tell the people that I work with is control the controllables, right? You can control that all the gyms have been closed, right? So there's no point sort of beating yourself up about it, because that was out of your control. So you've got to think, right, what else can we do from there? Tim, what were your thoughts?
I think just echoing that, really, you know, control what you can control. You know, assess your situation, what equipment you've got access to. And then again, coming back to the point I made about having something that's measurable, I think is really important. So if you've only got a kettlebell and a resistance band, you know, Chris has put some programs and stuff out for that, depending on what equipment you've got. But just look at the program. How am I going to progress with that? Can I increase the density, the amount of work I'm getting done? Can I get it done quicker? Can I do more reps? Can I slow the tempo down? You know, those are all measurable things that we can keep in control of and keep pushing. And then you can kind of look at the less measurable stuff, like how do I feel? How much am I back hurting? How do my knees feel? How do my hips feel? Stuff like that. Are my shoulders moving right? Can I actually control something? If we focus on like sensory movement, sensory motor kind of movements, where, you know, we might do a front foot elevated split squat with the kettlebell goblet position and just move through that really slowly and just think about what's my knee doing at the bottom. I've noticed when I'm doing split squats, as soon as I get into the bottom, my knee will jiggle from side to side right in the bottom. And so for me, it's just kind of examining that movement. Where does it happen? Can I keep it still? Do I need to keep it still? How does it feel when I keep it still? How does it feel when I let it move? And just kind of, you know, make do with what you've got, because
I think that's a really big point there, Tim. Something I've touched on with a lot of clients in this time. Let's focus on quality of movement again, because that's going to translate over a lot more when we get back under a bar. So like stuff like you just mentioned, like if you usually just coast through split squats and you've got, you know, instability going on and all the rest of it, but you're not consciously correcting it, you're just getting through it because it's an accessory movement. Now's your opportunity to actually refine that, make that better, and get better at the stuff that you're shit at. Yeah. I think if you do that in this time, again, you're going to see the benefit when we come back to the bar. So I completely agree with Tim there.
Yeah. On that. Watching, I had cameras in my house yesterday. I was doing split squats. It seems to be that, you know, I don't have as much equipment. Like I mentioned, I've got a log and some kettlebells. But because these exercises are novel, I know I don't like single leg stuff. When it comes to training, I'm never really going to push it as much as I could. But exactly like what you mentioned, this is what I've got to work with. And there will be a training effect because it's a novel movement and you can get strong within that and you can still see progress. And, you know, that quality of movement, you are going to be reap the benefits of it when it comes back to using a barbell. You're just changing your approach a little bit and, you know, building up the strengths in other areas. So quite a lot of sort of topics touched on that. I know, obviously, Chris sort of short on time. So what we'll do is, for everything that we've chatted about there, what would be all of your take-home points or words of wisdom from what we've chatted about there?
I think being creative and trying to find ways of making progress around this time is absolutely essential. Don't think that you're going to lose all your gains and all your strength and have to start from zero. Do anything you can to maintain the lifting habit so that when this all does pass, you can get back into training, you can get into making gains as quickly as possible, and we'll be able to put this all behind us really, really quickly.
Dan, Tim, who's up next?
I'll go. So I think really just going back to finding stuff that's measurable. Assess your situation, figure out what you've got, what you can do with it, find a way to progress with that, keep tracking it, keep beating it, challenge yourself, because otherwise you're just going to, get yourself stuck in a rut, feeling despondent, and you're going to come out of this having made no progress, and other people that have kind of, laid a really broad foundation to progress off of, and you'll be starting off on square one. So
you've been thinking about. You knew I was going to ask that question. That was a very succinct response. I like that.
Summarised that really, really well. I think obviously it's going to be an amalgamation of what Chris and Tim have just said, really. And yourself, to be honest. Like, control the controllables, but use this time to your advantage. I think the moment you see it as a negative thing, that's exactly what it's going to become. So, the stuff that we've discussed, do the stuff that you're shit at, get better at it, and then progress in that set. I think from a mental perspective as well, we touched on it earlier on. Try and think about, what you, like Tim said, what you use in powerlifting to fill in terms of that void. A lot of people are now completely lost. Like, the people that I see on social media now, powerlifting's kind of gone because they can't train, and they've just disappeared because they have nothing else to talk about, and that's kind of them in a box. Take yourself out of that a little bit, focus on your family, friends, everything outside of that, the stuff that you neglect, that you probably take for granted, take in the stuff outside and everything else. I think that's been massive for me, just actually appreciating what's around me a little bit more, instead of being confined to just the four walls of the gym, because as PTs, we all just live there, and we don't do much outside of it. We really don't, apart from the 1 or 2 days we might have off a week. So just take that into consideration as well. Actually enjoy what's going on right now and take pleasure in the small tasks. So even if it's like taking your dog for a walk, cleaning your car, cleaning your house, pay attention to it and actually take it all in. And all of a sudden everything becomes a little bit more enjoyable. So that'd be kind of my advice there. So, take pride in everything that you're doing, even if it's something that usually you'd take for granted. And I think everybody will come out of this a lot better in every sense, not just from a training perspective, than they went in.
Nice. I think that was 3 really good summaries there. And I know obviously, from the powerlifting world, for maybe beginners or intermediates, it's been a little bit worrying, thinking, oh God, what we're going to go from there. So for everyone listening, I hope that's sort of giving you a little bit of, positivity for going forward. I appreciate, Dan, Tim, Chris, thanks a lot for taking the time to, put this content out there. For everyone listening who might have any questions from what we chatted about today, or maybe want to get involved and reach out to you guys and maybe get involved in some coaching or a little bit of advice, where can people find you or get in touch with you?
So my Instagram is the Heavy Metal Strength Coach. I've got a website called gainsglitter.co.uk. And I'm on Facebook as Chris Kershaw, so anyone can reach out as much as they possibly want.
Awesome. Who's next?
I'm on Instagram as Tim Graft Powerlifting. You can email me at tim@grafttrainingprinciples.com, or you can find my website as grafttrainingprinciples.com.
Yeah, likewise. I'm on all social media platforms. You'll find me on Instagram as Strength Coach Bedford. I've got a website which is Bedford Strength and Performance Coaching. You can contact me through there via email, and I'm also on Facebook as Daniel Bedford. So any questions you've got, you can get in touch with me through all 3 of those platforms.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for you guys jumping on the podcast. I really enjoyed chatting to you in the first powerlifting roundtable that we had. Enjoyed this one even more. To everyone listening, whether it be locally or further afield, 100% check out the content that these guys are putting out there, whether it is powerlifting or strength training in general. The coaches at the end of the day, and they're there to help you. And I hope from the chat that we've had today, it's given you everyone listening a little bit more of a positive spin on things, so that it's not the end of the world. We will be back sort of chasing the gains under the barbell, if you like. So thanks a lot, Chris, Dan, and Tim, for taking the time to chat with me. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Thanks for having us, man.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
mate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate.